Hey. Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Friday, the 3rd of May, 2019. But the title of this morning's broadcast is, it might only be the 3rd, but it's definitely the end of May. Well, checking the election results so far, no real surprises, and not least the Tory party and many Tory councillors around the country are cussing the role of the Tory government, and in particular Theresa May, in kicking the Brexit can down the road. The country voted for Brexit and expected its politicians to deliver on that promise, but of course nothing could be further from the truth. So consequently, Theresa May has cost many Tory councillors, including many very seasoned council leaders, their seat. And there's a lot of bitterness around the country. Actually, that bitterness also runs over to the Labour Party, and particularly in the northeast, which voted very strongly in favour of Brexit. And the Labour voters there feel very much betrayed by Jeremy Corbyn backtracking on the second referendum, although Jeremy Corbyn has reportedly refused to incorporate a second referendum into the European elections manifesto, which are due at the end of the month. But nonetheless, the duality and the duplicity of Corbyn's stance has cost many Labour councillors their seat. So as of about half an hour ago, these were the results, and now this is less than half of the results that will ultimately be released. But Conservatives have lost 433 seats. Labour have lost 81 seats. And here's perhaps a bit of the surprise, but the Lib Dems have picked up 301 seats. And, this is very well done to the Lib Dems. Obviously, excellent campaigning. Although, you're never going to get a better opportunity to take seats from the Labour and Tories, because they have screwed up royally over the past, 2.5 years or so. But certainly over the last few months, in their failure, absolute abject failure to deliver Brexit. So the Greens, they've gained 38 seats, and that's probably a little bit of a swing following the Extinction Rebellion effect. But they're not going to make any serious gains, although I do believe that the Greens have actually taken one council in the Sunderland area. So an interesting turn of events there. But the North East, very, very much pro-Brexit. And Labour are likely to get a bit of a spanking in the northeast, and who's going to gain? Well, that's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. But the independents, people have been voting for independent candidates, which just goes to show the attitude is definitely hardening towards the lamestream parties, more in favour of independents. Now, of course, the upside is that hopefully those people remain independent. And I know some independent councillors, and they absolutely embrace the importance on their role as independent candidates in holding the other parties to account. So 110 councils have published their results now. They're out of 259. So, there's still 149 or so to be released. And it seems that the independent candidates are actually trawling about 25% of the total vote, which is truly remarkable. And hopefully this is a trend that, we'll see continue. So well done to all those people who did vote yesterday. And as I've acknowledged, I do understand those people who choose not to vote. Unfortunately, if you don't vote, it's effectively a vote for the incumbent. Whereas a vote for an independent or an opponent to the incumbent obviously is very meaningful, and it changes the dynamic. So somebody's just posted that we need a GC MAF party, and you know what? I think that there's perhaps more than a germ of an idea there. But anyway, we're more of that later. Let's see how that unfolds. Elsewhere, of course, the people of South Staffordshire this morning can go back to having a lie-in rather than having to walk down to the corner shop to get their morning papers, because their paper boy, Gavin Williamson, is back on his round, having been bounced out of his role as Minister of Toy Boats in the Bath. So, he is now the one carrying the can for leaking the Security Council's decision to permit the Chinese company Huawei to install their 5G equipment around the country. Now, there's a couple of interesting points that come out of this. First of all, that it seems that Gavin Williamson was persona non gratis, and perhaps he was set up. I mean, he is still stating very vehemently that he was not responsible for the leak, and he was trying to put the blame on a senior civil servant. But Gavin is the one where the finger has finally pointed. He's out of a job, and so consequently, we're going to see if we get a real statesman in that role. Unlikely, because I can't actually think of any in the British government right now. But it'd be great to see statesmen emerging into the political arena. But they're kids, and when we see the mentality and we see the way in which MPs attempt to articulate their case while saying nothing, and the likes of Claire Perry, an abject example of the intellectual pygmy that has ascended into a ministerial role. And sadly, obviously it's very clear that the country is effectively directionless at the moment. But hopefully we wouldn't even be participating in the European elections at the end of the month. But if we do, then hopefully the message that will be sent will be very, very clear that the UK is coming out. And what's interesting is that UKIP have lost 54 of their council seats so far. So this is interesting because people are perhaps deciding that UKIP is now a spent force, and that basically they need to throw their lot in behind Nigel Farage. Well, let's just remember what Farage did last time, because having campaigned for some 20 odd years to get Britain out of the EU, the moment that the result was announced, he said, that's it, my job's done, I'm out of here. But of course his job wasn't done, and then it was left to Theresa May, who replaced Cameron, of course, but it was left to Theresa May to make sure that the country never actually came out of the EU. Now, because of that, there's a lot of people who don't trust Farage, and I'm not going to make any comment at all. My concern is certainly that there are two Brexit parties, UKIP and the Brexit Party, which split the Brexit vote. And of course, this is the age-old, tried and tested tactic of splitting the vote so that the lamestream parties still get in. And of course, this was never more evident than in Sedgefield, Tony Blair's constituency, in 2005, where the ballot paper was absolutely stuffed with candidates, independent candidates, and so consequently Tony Blair, even though the actual total of his votes went down, the margin by which he won actually increased, because all the other votes were divided amongst all the other candidates. Had the other candidates not stood and allowed Reg Keys to challenge Tony Blair, there's little doubt in my mind that Reg Keys would have walked out of Sedgefield that night as the newly elected MP. But of course the establishment couldn't have a dead duck Prime Minister, even one as unpopular as the socio-psychopathic murderer Tony Blair. Then basically they needed to get him back into Westminster. So the good news is that what's occurring has triggered more interest than perhaps would otherwise be the case, and people are starting to engage once again in the political arena, which has got to be all good. But let me come back to this Gavin Williamson debacle for a second, because the concern is that a decision taken by the Security Council was leaked. Whatever happened to transparent government? I mean, who provides the 5G equipment is perhaps a moot point, because the 5G shouldn't be being rolled out anyway, because it's not exactly in the best interests of any organic entity on the planet. But the focus is on Gavin Williamson for having leaked it, which of course takes the attention away from the real issue, which is, so what's the problem with actually sharing that the Security Council have taken the decision to allow a Chinese company to install the core of the telecoms infrastructure around the country over the next decade or so? Why is it important to the establishment not to share that with the wider public? And that perhaps is the question that we really need to be answering, or asking and them answering, which is why, it's really crucial that we find a way to evolve what has become a stale political process. So we're going to go into the weekend, still waiting on 140 odd councils to announce their results. So, on Monday morning, we'll be able to give a bit more of an update and hopefully a bit of an insight into the new political landscape around the UK. Now, yesterday, I had a full-on day. I caught up with David Noakes and Lynn Tyre, and spent a few hours catching up with them before we went up to the UK Column Studios, where I recorded an interview with David and then with Lynn, and that's also on my YouTube channel. And please take some time to watch that interview. Obviously, David is just a little over a week from having been released from Wandsworth Prison. He's still recovering physically and emotionally from that experience. It's not one that any one of us, I think, would wish on anybody other than Tony Blair. But, nonetheless, David is, getting his head back together, looking at, how he can get his life back together. But, of course, that's not even going to be possible because David and Lynn are facing extradition to France. So, please, anyone who has any concerns or issues about GCMAF, look at this interview and then do your own research, because I think it will become very evident that we have a medical establishment that is not interested in health. We have a medical establishment that is basically a front of house marketing organisation for Big Pharma, and Big Pharma's not about to let any of its revenue stream disappear because somebody's come along and developed a cure for what have previously been acknowledged as incurable diseases. Well, obviously we had to do that interview in the afternoon, so although it was broadcast at the normal time for Humanity vs Insanity at 7:30, we had to record it a couple of hours earlier because we had to get David back to his residence by 7 p.m. because that's his curfew, and I think we just about made it. Well, driving back to this beautiful spot in South Devon on the edge of Dartmoor, I received a call from Gemma O'Doherty, who asked me if I'd join her to talk about, a number of subjects, but not least geoengineering. And, I think we now have to really push some of the issues that have been dismissed, because the evidence of geoengineering, of weather modification, weather manipulation is increasing exponentially, not least, of course, because Harvard has recently published a report that states that geoengineering is absolutely necessary if the temperatures on the planet are going to be reduced, and certainly if we're going to avoid the catastrophic rise of 1.5 degrees in the global temperatures. Well, all we can say is people need to do their own research, but the bottom line is that thanks to the attention being drawn to the climate issue by Extinction Rebellion, more and more people are doing their research, and they are looking at the information that suggests that actually climate change isn't a real issue, certainly not as being presented by the establishment. But, we might be about to experience a very significant change in our climate as a result, not of industrialization, but as a result of solar activity. And the issue is that solar activity may be on the cusp of taking the temperature on the planet down a few degrees rather than up. And we may actually be on the cusp of re-entering a mini ice age, but nothing to do with the industrialization. But we do have pollution issues. And of course, the whole climate change agenda works very, very nicely for the corporatocracy because it takes the focus away from the component issues, such as, the pollution, the leaching of methane into the atmosphere, the increase in plastics being produced. But notice that the focus isn't on the corporatists, isn't on the companies that are contributing to this pollution, it's on the end user. And of course, the purpose of focusing on the end user is to convince the end user that they should be paying more tax to counter the potential catastrophe. Well, if there is more tax to be paid, of course, it should be levied on the corporation. But then, of course, the corporations just increase their pricing, so ultimately it still ends up with the consumer. But nonetheless, if the real focus is on the likes of INEOS, and it certainly will be over the next few days as Team INEOS, formerly known as Team Sky, parade around North Yorkshire, and as Jim Ratcliffe gives the finger to all the people of North East Derbyshire and Yorkshire, because he still says it's just a misguided minority that oppose fracking. And yes, we're going to continue to push that agenda. And yes, we're going to put INEOS's name right out in the public so that, they know who we are. And there might just be a bit less resistance to our attempts when they realise we're just a nice, friendly, fluffy plastics and chemicals company, like there's any such thing. Well, once again, just like Extinction Rebellion drawing attention to the climate issue and people doing their own research and deciding for themselves whether there's a real threat, people are also doing their research into INEOS. And I think that over the next few days, Team INEOS may find that the vocal opposition to their presence in Yorkshire actually increases. Well, it's getting a bit cold up here on the edge of Haytor behind me. I've got a beautiful view this morning right out down the Tin Valley, right out to Tor Bay, whereas of course a couple of days ago it was so misty I could barely see, probably more than about 100 meters or so. But beautiful spring morning. I'm going to maybe just venture up to the top of Haytor and get the full force of this fresh onshore wind that's coming into South Devon right now. But I think it's going to be a very interesting weekend in many ways. And I'm obviously finalising my preparation for AV10, which will be next weekend. And just to let you know, there's a few day tickets left for Saturday. There's a few more for Sunday and Monday. But if you do want to get day tickets for AV10, then I would counsel that you do that sooner rather than later. And for those of you who can't get to AV10 for one reason or another, then the event will be live streamed. And to sign up for that live stream, then go to the website www.alternativeview.co.uk. Meanwhile, you have a great weekend, and I will be back with you on Monday morning at 8:30. You take care now.